residents alike. I have a short statement to read out first on purdah that I've been asked to inflict upon you. Members need to be mindful that during the pre-election purdah period, the Council must not be seen to be attempting to influence public opinion or promoting the public image of individual candidates or the views of a particular party, a political party. Council business can and must continue during the election period, but business should be thoroughly considered to ensure that the Council process and business before it is not used or allowed to be used or manipulated by anyone for private or party political purposes. I do hope that's clear. As if you would. Welcome to Councillor Nicholson, Cabinet Member for Housing and Planning Services, and to Councillor Johnson, Leader of the Council, and is also the Ward Councillor for the particular property that we're here to discuss. Fire alarms procedure. Fire alarm if the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the offices down the main staircase opposite the lifts in the foyer. Assemble in Hawley Square on the green. Officers will assist you and advise you when it is deemed safe to return to the chamber. Restriction on the use of mobile phones. Would everyone present please ensure that their mobile phones are turned to silent and they are not used to make or receive phone calls in the chamber whilst the meeting is in progress. Does anyone intend to film the meeting? As there's a camera there, I assume that's the case. Okay. Any member of the public who objects to the possibility of being filmed may wish to take this opportunity to leave the meeting. I would advise that if filming takes place, anyone in attendance in the public areas may have their image captured, but I do urge anyone filming proceedings to avoid filming members of the public, particularly if there are children present. Speaking under 24.1. The following members requested to speak under 24.1. Councillor Wells. Are there any other members wishing to speak under 24.1? I indicate Councillor Iris Johnson. Apologies for absence. Apologies were received from the following members. Councillor Gibson, Councillor Gideon, who is being substituted by Councillor Bayford, Councillor Ian Gregory, who is being substituted by Councillor Binks, Councillor Hornis, who is being substituted by Councillor M. Saunders. Are there any further apologies? Are there any declarations of interest?
Is it possible that Councillor Wells might have to declare an interest, seeing he has a close relationship and friendship with the person who owns the adjoining land? Thank you.
I'll back that over to you, Mr. Ball.
Chairman, yes, I don't know the exact nature of that, and it's not something I've had a conversation with Councillor Wells about. I don't know if he wants to consider his position and elucidate a little bit more on what the nature of that interest might be.
The nature of the interest is simply that I assume we're referring to Mr. Miles, that when I was in the Conservative Party, Mr. Miles was the chairman of the ward in which I stood as a county councillor from 2005 to 2013.
Chairman, if that's the only interest that Councillor Wells has, it's not something I would have expected him to declare.
Then I will call Councillor Wells forward under 24.1. If you would like to speak now, Councillor Wells, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I spoke at the Cabinet meeting on the issue of this hotel and its positioning now into the housing budget rather than anywhere else that it should have been. I want to recap and underscore for the members of the Scrutiny panel a couple of points about the history of this which seem to me extraordinarily relevant. Firstly, that it was initially compulsory purchased on the basis that if we couldn't find a serious and sensible expression of interest within 6 months, it was to be demolished and grassed over. That was part of the original compulsory purchase documentation. When it next came before Cabinet and Council, it came before them in order to overturn that option for demolition and grassing on the grounds that were, and I quote the head of community services at the time, two serious and competing interests for using that particular site. It would appear after that, and those interests went away, the option for demolition and grassing was never put back on the table, even though it was accepted by all that the building itself was in a very, very serious state of disrepair. Other interests then appear to come along. We have freedom of information requests requested by a member of the public that demonstrate that some of those interests were there and thereabouts, and there seem to be issues about when the freehold was available, when the freehold wasn't available, and there seems to be a little bit of altering of the mind of the council within that context, which of course absolutely changes the nature of any developer's interest. And certainly when the Turner Contemporary were interested in doing something on this particular site, it was the withdrawal of the freehold that appeared to actually end their interest rather than anything else. And I'm interested in what the explanation may be from the relevant officers and cabinet members as to why on certain occasions the freehold is available and on certain other occasions it seems not to be en route. There was nothing in any of the reports that told us what the costs and styles and types of marketing of this property were, and whether or not that cost actually demonstrates that there were really serious attempts to actually market this particular area. And I do think it's an interesting position here that we find ourselves in. We're talking now about using £950,000 worth of balances to put, well, I don't know how many units. There's rumours of anything between 3 and 6. But that makes them really quite expensive elements of social housing. Particularly if you look down the other end of Margate Seafront, and we have 36 empty properties with seafront views in a place called Arlington House that this council could have some influence over doing. It seems to me that this is almost like shutting the stable door after the horse has bolted, and having exhausted all other things we could think of, and actually throwing some of those off by changing our minds en route, we fall back on the one thing we think we know we can actually do something with ourselves. And we're all aware, of course, that it has to be social housing, because if we actually go for private sector housing and we go to sell it and make some money, we actually overturn the principles of the CPO and have to give it back to the people we took it from in the first place, who I understand, and again there's nothing in the report that tells me so, have yet to even finish the negotiation for their compensation for that CPO, let alone parting with any money in order to do so. And I find it interesting that the value of the building is able to be written off as nil in accountancy terms when that particular compensation negotiation doesn't seem to be concluded, so there must be a value associated with that hanging around the area of this particular building. It does seem to me that under more than one colour of cabinet, let's be clear about that, more than one colour of cabinet, the decisions associated with this building have not exactly led us out there as being a leading light of forward-thinking regeneration councillors. And I do think we've got to the stage now where it is let's do the least worst option, the one thing we know we can get away with, because everything we should have done has been half tried and failed. In these circumstances, I would strongly urge the scrutiny panel actually exercise their right to throw this back to the cabinet, albeit it might be a different cabinet in due course, who knows, and actually ask them to look more closely at what they could have, should have and may have done, rather than falling back on this particular option, which I think could actually be involved with sites elsewhere to more cost effect, whilst we do something here that could add to the tourist offer of this town, which is supposed to be something we're all interested in doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wells. I'm going to bring the Chief Executive in, Ms Homer.
I wonder if the panel would indulge me while we do a bit of a reflect back on this subject, which I think will capture, which will respond to some of the questions that Councillor Wells has raised. I would just firstly like to point out that the CPO compensation issue is a separate issue, and that's not under discussion this evening. And that doesn't prevent us from dealing with the property. Now, the issue around the demolition of the building, I do want you, if you could indulge me for a moment, I just want to highlight the fact that this has been to Cabinet on at least 5 occasions. We did CPO it back in 2010. In February 2011, there were 3 options put forward for consideration by Cabinet on the 10th of February, and that was to market and promote, demolish, or perhaps a mix of the 2 approaches. As a result of that, on the 17th of March, permission to promote the site for development was actually given, and that was following a decision notice. There was valuation information in the report, and as a result of that, a campaign for soft marketing was undertaken, which I think also included the installation of the iconic sign. I'm sure we all remember that. And there was lots of press articles around that at the time, so it was well publicised. As a result of that soft market testing, there was a cabinet paper that updated on progress on that in September 2011. The marketing campaign itself led to 20 inquiries regarding the Fort Road Hotel, and there's plenty of details in that cabinet paper about the procurement, the process that was followed to advertise those invite those expressions of interest. We even got to a shortlist and interview process in December. As a result of the cabinet paper in 2011, it was agreed to permit the council to continue to seek a developer, but to review the position in 12 months from the date of that paper, i.e. September 2011. And at each cabinet meeting, an opportunity was given, options were given for the cabinet to decide what they wanted to do with this particular property, including the option still to demolish it. But cabinet, for reasons that are contained in that paper, decided to progress. There was a further cabinet on the 6th of January 2012, which again was an update on progress. And following the marketing exercise for the development opportunity to deliver a high quality boutique hotel, 30 inquiries were received and all were sent application packs, but we received none in return. The feedback as a result of that from the interested parties who we'd approached indicated that the lack of amenity land on the site were major reasons for not taking the project forward. However, Council had been in discussions also with Spitalfields Trust at the time, a charity which rescues derelict houses. So we did continue with those discussions for a period of time, but were unable to conclude on that particular option either. Discussions were then had with a view to transferring of the freehold, and 3 options were again presented to Cabinet, again to seek permission to demolish, to CPO some neighbouring land, or to continue to work with the Spitalfields Trust, or to form a preservation trust decision. To form a preservation trust, I beg your pardon. Cabinet agreed to option 2 and 3 on that particular Cabinet report, with the potential of setting up the preservation trust. However, as I've said, that didn't materialise, and in a Cabinet paper on the 26th of July, there was a proposed disposal for the freehold, again for the Fort Road Hotel, and to begin further negotiations with 2 parties, Party A and Party B, and that was agreed, and authority was given to the Director of Community Services to continue negotiations, and as a result of those negotiations we did get as far as a development agreement with Party B. Unfortunately, Party B, we then did terminate that arrangement because Party B failed to conclude the matter and clearly were having financial problems and were unable to pursue it. So as a result of that, we then started to review the situation with a view to whether we could, because this had been going on for some years at this stage, with a view to whether we could in fact turn it into housing, residential housing ourselves. Now, before that was concluded, we were approached by Turner, who said they were interested in it, but we felt it appropriate, because of the amount of time that had been passed, it would be appropriate to go out to the market and test the market again, because that's what we needed to do. At no time was, and this is just a response back to the question about us removing the option to transfer as part of a proper process, that was never actually removed, but it was actually the case that Turner did not actually submit any interest as a result of that public process to invite expressions of interest into the market. Now, the date of that most recent testing of the market was, I believe, August of last year. And unfortunately, again, on that occasion, we did not receive, as I understand it, from Mrs Crowley. We did not receive any submission from Turner or any other submission from any other interested party, hence why the paper was put forward to Cabinet on April the 2nd for it to be turned into social housing. I would also remind members that in order to have demolished the Fort Road Hotel, we would have had to have got Secretary of State consent for that. And actually, in relation to the CPO, it is not an absolute requirement that it was demolished. The CPO is made for the purpose of facilitating the improvement and development of the Fort Road Hotel. I've covered quite a lot, I accept in that, but I just thought it was important we brought those points out.
Thank you very much. I'll just make the reasons why the call-in have been called. And I... Okay. No, just a second. I'm making a statement, Councillor Wells. Okay. And then I've got Councillor Driver who's indicated first before you, but I will bring you back in. If you wish. Oh, pardon? Well, okay. Let's be compliant. Yeah, we are in Purda. Let's be compliant. The reason... I know, I'm not breaking the rules, but... Yeah. The reason it's been called in is that I believe, this is the Chair, Councillor Gideon, I believe that not all options for the site have been considered. That's the only reason that this has been called in. That the options have not been considered, all options have not been considered for the site. Councillor Driver.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I've got to confess I'm rather astonished and actually quite annoyed by what I've just heard. The report says that, as you rightly say, Chair, that the reason for calling was that all options have not been considered. Now we've got a flimsy report. The Chief Executive has come here pre-prepared, has done lots of homework about all the options that were considered and when and by who, but that information has not been made available to the Scrutiny Committee. To be perfectly honest, I think what's happened here has been an abuse of process by the Chief Executive. We, as the Scrutiny Committee, are here to scrutinise the actions of the Executive. We needed, before this meeting, the documents that the Chief Executive referred to. And I must say, I'm very disappointed and very annoyed that those documents have not been available before this meeting, and now we've got the farcical situation whereby we've got to sit here listening to a recount of events at breakneck speed without having the opportunity to consider properly what's gone on. I personally think that this meeting should be abandoned and held at another day, because frankly we've had the piss taken out of us.
Councillor Driver, could you please moderate your language? Thank you. Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can now, yes.
Thank you, Chairman. I would remind Councillor Driver and other members that I've been involved in this Fort Road Hotel item for quite some time. I've merely reminded myself of the facts of the history attached to the Fort Road Hotel, and actually the documents I've referred to are Cabinet reports, which are available to anybody to look at. Thank you.
Thank you. Just for explanation, under Rule 24.1, you can speak an additional time only for a point of order or a personal explanation. Councillor Wells, is it a point of order or a personal explanation?
It's a personal explanation, Mr. Chairman.
Then you can carry on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I listened with great interest to the Chief Executive's recounting of her narrative. And the only thing I would say was I made a particular reference to withdrawal of the freehold in relation to the Turner Contemporary application, because the description she gave of those events is also the description given to a member of the public in a Freedom of Information Act, Freedom of Information request, and the answers given to that, which suggests that it was indeed the Council that withdrew the freehold on that occasion. That is why I made reference to that point. It didn't reflect in the same way what the Chief Executive said. And I suppose, whilst I'll try and state it a little more politely, I suppose that puts us back in where Councillor Driver was, in that if you're going to get involved in cross-references that may not be accurate, we really do need to have those documents available so somebody, if only the legal officer, can look at them.
Would you like to respond to that, Chief Executive?
Obviously, I can't comment on the FOI request. I'm not sure I've seen that, but actually, I have the head of economic development and asset management in an email very much confirmed that we were not actually withdrawing that as part of the process. So I'm afraid that's all I can say. Thank you.
Councillor Bayford.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think that one of the reasons that this has come here is the fact that to some of us, the decision for this site to go to social housing seemed slightly sudden. And certainly Councillor Mrs Johnson does often make the point that there's a lot of cross-party working and we do cooperate and whatever. But I don't recall, although I'm getting old so I may forget, but I don't recall us having a discussion that it was going to come forward in the way it did. And certainly, yes, I was partly involved with some of those cabinet decisions that were taken in the past, and I know we went through lots of twists and turns, but I think that certainly I feel that the point made by Councillor Driver in his own inimitable style, probably has got some substance in that it would be useful for a wider section of the council other than just the cabinet to be able to have a chance to review the events and see how we got where we did, but also to be able to see just what market testing was taken. I mean, it's easy to say, well, we put it out to the market, but at one point we say, well, it was for a boutique hotel. Another we said, well, the Turner was interested, but we're not quite sure what they were interested in or for or whatever. So I do feel that, particularly now that there's been a lot of public interest in this now, it's come back again, that the right course of action would be for this to be referred to a future overview and scrutiny to set up a subgroup that could actually go back, look over the history, look at what's been done, to consider whether there are options maybe that still at this stage could be considered that haven't been. The thing that concerns me, and I'd like Mr Boyle's advice on this, is that we talk about what the recommendations could be, but then we talk about the decision-making process. And 7.2, read in one way, could suggest that if we refer it to a future overview and scrutiny rather than referring it back to Cabinet, that the decision could be taken anyway. Clearly, if we refer it to a future Cabinet, then that goes to a future Cabinet. But of course, we don't know what that future Cabinet could look like.
What we've heard tonight is that if we don't take one recommendation, then it will be a decision that's made, done and dusted. And that doesn't sound to me it just doesn't sound quite right. It smacks wrong for me, and I don't think the public would think that either, but that's my own personal opinion. I've come at this late, so I would support Councillor Bayford's proposal, because I think that's the fair way to do it.
Councillor Gregory.
Thank you, Chairman. I think we need to make it quite clear that you have to link paragraphs 6.1 and 6.2 with 7.1 and 7.2, because 6.1 says that the Cabinet reconsiders its decision. Now 7.1 says that can't happen until after the elections. 7.2 says it can happen before the election because it says implement the decision, and that's the decision which it made on the 2nd of April. And so that is why we're going for 7.1 or 6.1, which they both mean exactly the same thing.
Mr Boyle.
Just so there is no lack of clarity, Chairman, if I can read out from the Constitution directly so that Councillor Bayford is assured.
No, let's listen to the Constitution, Councillor Bayford.
In terms of Overview and Scrutiny Committee, it says if the committee does meet but does not refer the matter back to the decision-making body or person, the decision shall take effect on the expiration of the period of the date, talking about fixing a date of the Overview and Scrutiny panel meeting, or the date of the meeting itself, whichever is earlier. And because we're having a meeting, that would take the next day.
I must admit I am somewhat confused, Councillor Baker, in the sense that the whole thrust of your particular argument initially was that it was seen to be somehow unfair that it was taken by a cohort of an executive to make this decision, rather than the members, a wider panel of members, partly through overview and scrutiny. Now, however, you're proposing it to be referred back to that same, maybe a different cohort, but it still be a member of the executive, without influence from that wider panel of members. You can certainly.
Simply because it's Hobson's choice, really, isn't it? Because if we don't do that, then the decision gets implemented. Most people, well, I think a lot of people think that it may be not a very good decision, but certainly that it's a decision that warrants re-examination. And what we're trusting is that a future cabinet, whatever its makeup might be, may actually take a more enlightened view and in fact may reconsider that decision, and could even maybe itself ask overview and scrutiny for some guidance in the spirit of democracy, which we all enjoy so much, don't we? Absolutely, absolutely.
Perhaps I'd like to bring in Councillor Johnson, Leader of the Council, and also ward member for this particular structure that we're talking about. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Obviously, those of us who have lived with the issues surrounding this building from a ward point of view from 2003, but really for probably about 30 years of walking past it, hearing from people who lived in it, then hearing from the residents who had to overlook it. For many, many years, this building has been a problem. In 2003, around the time of the by-election, the then owner painted half the building, and we thought, oh good, they're going to do something with it, but it never progressed past a bit of painting halfway up the side of the building. And during the years that we were out of control of this council, other people looked to see what could be done, and eventually, in fairness, it was CPO'd in that October 2010. There were 3 cabinet meetings described by Mrs. Homer that would have been under a different political colour, and there were 3 under our administration, under Councillor Hart, and more recently under myself. Complete and absolute frustration over 30 years with this building. The residents who live at Home Fern constantly phone me. I go to their meetings. I most recently went to their meeting to tell them that we were making this decision. They were very, very pleased, and the Chair of Residents came out with one of her committee to talk to the press with me and Councillor Nicholson on Saturday. They want us to get on and do something with it. When the council compulsory purchased and said that within 6 months, if something hadn't been done, it would be demolished, I was on site with Derek Harding and the owner of the properties at the back. Thank you very much, demolish it, we'd be very pleased to have it grassed over, it would be very pleasant. Then the council, again, changed its mind and said no, we'll go out and soft market test and see if we can get someone interested. Then Beachbed Babylon spent a lot of time, and Guy Holloway had amazing drawings, which we were all pleased with in 2013. Then, as Madeline has gone through all the different bit of fields, is it, others that were interested, we thought we had, a trust that might be set up and something might happen. Anyone who ever asked me about buildings, language schools and others, I said, we have this building up here, why don't you go and speak to our officers? It was advertised, it was definitely known to people that it was available. There seems to have been very serious concerns for me around the time of the CPO that the building only was procured and not some of the land surrounding it, which is a difficulty for anyone who wanted it for a hotel or other uses. Very, very recently I've been speaking to Uwe Dirksen and Hugo Fennig about it as a possibility for the art school. Definitely I knew about the Turner interest, which was only one member of staff who later left and didn't get any further, but I was enthused by their ideas, but then funding is always an issue. I've been in meetings where the Arts Council very recently weren't going to support that kind of funding that would be needed. I've been in another meeting where English Heritage didn't feel that this building could be listed, although it's in a conservation area. Officers here have described that the back of the building is in such a terrible state with single brick that it could probably not be sustainable and probably have to be removed. Someone has spread a rumour about luxury flats for our residents and 3 flats only. That figure and those 3 luxury flats were for 3-bedroomed flats if it was going to be sold last year, early last year I believe. Now the whole thing is under review. People actually need to read the recommendations from Cabinet. The Cabinet agreed to transfer the Fort Road Hotel to the from the general fund to the housing revenue account. That's one. For Cabinet to agree to allocate the property for housing purposes. For Cabinet to agree the use of HRA balances and 141 receipts where appropriate to undertake the development works up to 950,000. That's up to, and it'll be nowhere near it, but a figure had to be given because someday someone might say the underpinning of the building, which now people are campaigning to save, will be substantial. If you had demolished it as planned when you CPO'd it in 2003, I would have been okay with that. But then the future cabinets kept changing their minds, and when we took control of the council, we were stuck with that change of mind. There are a lot of people now very excited about this building, but I told everybody in my leader's speech on the 4th of December where we were at with it and the frustrations about it. And suddenly, just as we're getting to the cabinet meeting of the 2nd of April, all kinds of ideas are coming forward about who wants to have it. On the day that it went to cabinet, Pollock's, must be careful, Pollock's, the toy museum people contacted me in the late afternoon expressing that they might be interested, but they had no business plan or no great plans. I'm still in communication with them, but they only contacted me as the leader that afternoon when this building was going to come to cabinet. There's been 30 years of this building being a difficulty, particularly for nearby residents. The people who did up the Arcadian, and I officially was invited to open it as the mayor, were in despair because they were finding it difficult to sell their flats because of the building next door that belonged to the council, of which I was a member. Now, if you're going to throw it out tonight and throw it back to someone for the future, I have to go back and apologise to the residents in my ward who think at last we're doing something about it. Thank you.
Any questions? Any debate? The proposition has been put and seconded, 7.1, which you can read on page 3. Would you like me to read it out? If you would, yes. If the panel refers the decision back to Cabinet, the Executive ought to meet within 15 working days. However, it is not possible for Cabinet to meet within the timescale prior to the May election to comply with the pre-publication requirements of the Access to Information rules. The referral will therefore need to be considered by Cabinet as soon as practical in the new municipal year. Will those all in favour please show? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All those against, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That falls. Is there another proposition? Councillor Paul.
I would like to propose 6.2.
Is that seconded? I'll second it from the chair. All those in favour of 6.2, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All those against, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That is carried. 6.2 is carried. Thank you, and the meeting is closed.